Okay, my friends, this is going to be very interesting, I hope, and it will be for me, because I am going back to some of my early papers I wrote regarding the things that I discovered from the mud fossils. And I am a material scientist. I like to see the matter. I want to see something that indicates that there's a claim that can be supported by something physical. So I said, we all heard about Jesus. Now, is there anything physical that we can point to that may support some of the stories about him? And what stories did you hear? I heard all kinds of stories from this guy. I heard all kinds of stories from that guy, and some more from this guy. What makes sense? There's so many different interpretations of what happened in the ancient past. And Velikovsky was the one that went to every culture on the face of the planet, basically everyone, and they had the same story of a cataclysm, which was the worldwide flood that is recorded in the Bible and virtually everywhere. And it was recorded everywhere in every one of these cultures. There was this catastrophe, and it virtually wiped out almost everybody. And there was people that survived in every culture, it appears, because they wrote these stories. And they were diverse cultures. They weren't talking to each other. They knew from their own, history from that region, what happened in that region. And there was different things that happened in different areas, because the source of this whole issue was this catastrophe and this flood was when Venus literally was born from the feared god Jupiter. These are the statements in the ancient text. The fiery comet Venus was born from the feared god Jupiter. And it came towards Earth, and it appears to me it took 7 days of brilliant comet, like the sun, coming at us, burning everything up on the Earth, boiling the waters, and people were trying to hide in caves and mountains and everywhere else because they knew what was going to happen. When this thing hit the Earth, the waters were going to go crazy, and they did. And the only ones apparently to survive were the ones that went way up on the top of the mountains and hid in caves. And that kept them from being burned, and it kept them from being drowned, apparently. Now, and I see this in the mud fossils. I can understand how stuff was preserved way down in the low areas very well, and way up in the top areas it didn't get preserved all that well. They broke up and fell apart because they weren't saturated with water for extended periods of time. But the stuff low down was. Same material coming up the hill, but up at the top it dried out quicker. When they stay wet for a long period of time, that's what creates the mud fossils. Now, getting past that, I realized all this stuff was true. There was giants, there was dragons, all this stuff. I wrote all these papers back then long ago. So I decided, well, maybe there's something we can find out about Jesus Christ. There is the Shroud of Turin, and there is some relics that I don't really know much about. I don't put much faith in that kind of stuff. I mean, anybody can sell anything, make anything. I don't know. The Shroud of Turin could be totally real. I have no idea. But I'm looking at the ancient texts of what did happen on the earth, and who was God. God was Zeus of this solar system, and Zeus was a sex maniac. Right? He had sex with virtually anything that was walking. 2 legs, 4 legs, didn't matter. And that was what it was written about with Satan. It said, let's go down and have sex with all the women down there. We'll bring them down, eye makeup and all this fancy stuff, and we'll just have a party like crazy. We'll set up our headquarters on Mount Olympus, and we'll just party like wild dogs. And they did. Now, I think that was against God. So who is God? It apparently isn't Zeus, Jupiter, who was the god. He was the accepted god of this solar system. Very well written in these ancient texts. Zeus was the guy. And well, we can get real deep into it. But let's just see what I wrote 7 or 8 years ago, whatever it was. I think it was 2016, about any physical evidence to support Jesus. Let's see what happened. And I can't remember it that well, to be honest. And we'll find out. All right, this is just a little too coincidental. I woke up this morning thinking, I got to go back through my papers, and I'll start with Jesus chemistry. And pops up on my screen this morning is this, from a Facebook friend, Steve Lindsay. And it's about Jordan Maxwell and his interpretation of the gods. And the stuff that he was saying rings very, very realistic to me. Now, and I will express to you what his primary points are in here, and it was very interesting. I was pleasantly surprised. And then this pops up, because he's going to be talking about wars in heaven and stuff like that, which I will as well. NASA's daring mission to intercept the God of Chaos asteroid as it closes in on Earth. This is December 27th. Now, they're talking about it 2029 or something like that. It's going to be a very close flyby, whatever. I'm going to go back to what I wrote about Jesus in the Jesus chemistry, because I attributed possibly Jesus to being Venus. And now I'm starting to think back again. Maybe that has some validity. I don't know. I have no idea. That's why I'm reaching out for people that have information. And this guy, Jordan Maxwell, he's a very, very interesting guy. And we're going to go over this. And I'm just saying here, is Jesus chemistry? Is he what he was advertised as? Does he stand up to these stories? I got 983 views. Believe it or not, that's a lot of hits in an academic paper. People don't read this stuff. This is from August 2016. Now, I'm going to just read through it and make a couple of statements, because I don't remember what I wrote, to be perfectly honest with you, but I have a sort of a vague recollection of that period in time, because everything was starting to come together. And I got quite a few papers I wrote up on there. I think I got like 45 papers up here that are just things that I realized we weren't thinking correctly, if I'm right, or at least we need to discuss it one way or the other, because I had some pretty good evidence. So let's go through this. And I don't have this site anymore. Mudfossils.com got totally destroyed. I took it down. I mean, I still own that domain, but I don't use it anymore. Okay, so let's discuss what this paper says. This goes back to 2016, and I said, what chemistry is there to support this Jesus? And I wrote down here, Mudfossil researchers, which is me, at mudfossil.com did the research, which it was so whacked against that I just took everything down. And, people say, well, why would you do that? Who cares what everybody else thinks? Well, let me tell you something. When you present the stuff that I was presenting, I was slammed against by literally everybody, including my family, everybody. I mean, you're making a damn fool out of yourself. What are you, an idiot? Whatever. You're an embarrassment. And, I mean, it was not pleasant, and it never really did change. So I pretty much do this research on my own still, and what I did was I looked for extraordinary materials that coincided with worldwide events recorded in antiquity, and matter is made out of molecules. We all know is this matter. If you accept there is matter, it's made out of molecules, which are made out of elements, and matter will only bond with other compatible matter to form minerals, etc. Well, I don't know why I even wrote that, but that is true. Now, what is my work based on? I present this as a clinical work on our history. All original texts and stories and religious works and carvings, tablets, and myths of all cultures are considered in this. The source range from scholarly translations to museums to Immanuel Velikovsky, who I must call a hero, and he is. His research was legwork. He went out. No computers and many documents that were unimpeachable evidence of Venus' recent arrival. So Venus came out of Jupiter, they say, 1500 BC. This video explains, I think this is gone now too, I'm sure. He was a friend of Einstein, and he was about to be acknowledged by Albert but he died with Velikovsky's book open. 32 points he made came true about Venus and more, since all against academic theory. A great hero was destroyed. I'm sure this is down too. This is a shocker, and the chemistry, when tied to the recorded events, simply is unimpeachable. Well, I don't know about that anymore, but let's talk about what I did claim, because this is not necessarily my claims. This was what was written in history, and I'm sure this is gone too. A short video presents the evidence clinically video case for Jesus. The chemistry and the stories, do they match? All right, so what is the chemistry? What are the events? Now, I'm looking at Venus almost hitting Earth. And the statement that Jesus made about he was the bread that fell from heaven, something like that. And I believe that was part of this Venus birth that created the manna that fell from heaven every morning, basically. Now, this is what it says in the ancient text. It's stated that milk pellets and red dust and stones fell during Exodus. And this is that time, approximately 1500 BC. Now, Jesus states it was his literal body that fell to feed the refugees. Apparently that's what he said. Text about this from John 4. At this, the Jews began to grumble about Jesus because he said, I am the bread that came down from heaven. They were asking, is this not Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How can he say, I have come down from heaven? Stop grumbling among yourselves, Jesus replied. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up at the last day. It is written in the prophets, and they will all be taught by God. Everyone who has heard the Father and learned from him comes to me. Not that anyone has seen the Father except the one who is from God. Only he has seen the Father. Truly, 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 I tell you, he who believes who has eternal life. I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, yet they died. So this is the bread that comes down from heaven, so that anyone may eat of it and not die. Now, that's confusing. I really don't know. Again, I'm just sort of mumbling through this. He says, I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And this bread which I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. All right, so he died on the cross, giving his flesh as the bread to feed the believers. At this, the Jews began to argue among themselves, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? Now, this is where I come off with a little crazy stuff, I think. I'm talking about a literal birth of Venus from a literal vagina on Jupiter. I have shown this. And I might as well show it to you right now. So get prepared. It's going to be a little graphic. But in order for you to understand this, Jupiter, the planet Jupiter, gave literal birth, just as a woman would give birth through a vaginal canal, to a planet which eventually became Venus, a fiery comet, and eventually became Venus. And that is the Avenger that hit Earth, and not quite hit Earth, but it destroyed all of the giants at the same time, 1500 BC. And they all died, and the dragons and all that stuff. Basically, it looks to me as this is the same time frame. Everything died on the face of the planet, almost. The ones that survived way up in the top of the mountains in caves. I don't see any other way you could survive. Now, I was taking it that maybe Jupiter sent Venus, who was literally Jesus Christ, and was born to avenge and get rid of the giants, and then go and hit Mars, and which it did. It went and hit Mars and destroyed all the giant creatures on Mars, and they were exactly the same as on here, on Earth. The same creatures, same giants, absolutely enormous. And I'm sure there was dragons all over the place too up there. I don't know about that for a fact, because I've seen all of the body debris. I mean, it's just everywhere. And I'll show you that too. You know what? Let me just show you those two things so that we can establish the fact that Mars was totally inhabited exactly as it was here on Earth. And Venus did get ejected from a literal vagina on Jupiter, who was the feared god Zeus, who gave birth to the fiery comet Venus, which almost hit Earth, wiped everything out, then hit Mars, wiped it out completely. Now, Jordan Maxwell talks about Saturn being a military outpost that is preparing to do some kind of invasion. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but I can't see that's outside of the realm of possibilities. Because right now, because if you look into who, you know, what every planet has a certain way of doing things, and Mars, I guess, was, well, let's look at what the planets do. What Mars was always depicted of, what Jupiter, who was the god of the solar system, what Saturn was depicted of, what was their demeanor, how did they react, did they work with the other planets, because they were all working God against God. I mean, it was against each other too, just as it is now. Nation against nation, planet against planet, same thing. All right, Apollodorus wrote about these kind of things, and Mars was the god of war, and it was savaged by Venus, Venus being ejected from the feared god Jupiter, wiped out Mars, totally wiped it out, and it was exactly identical to Earth before this. You know, with all that's going on Earth and everything, I would, if I was God, I would intervene. And listen to this now. This is Saturn. All right, he was depicted as the golden age of abundance and peace. Abundance and peace was associated to Saturn. After the Roman conquest of Greece, he was conflated with the Greek Titan Kronos, so they sort of mixed them, and so who knows what. Saturn's consort was his sister Ops. Now listen to this. He was the father of Jupiter, Neptune, Pluto, Juno, Ceres, and Vesta. He was the father of Jupiter. Jupiter was Zeus. So Saturn was the father of Jupiter. Jupiter was the god of this solar system. So what does that make Saturn? And what we're going to get into this deeper, because you got to get to the sun too. The sun is another entity. It's not all of these planets and moons and everything. They were all gods. They had persona. They were not just like globs of dirt out there or something rolling around out in the sky. These were actually literally personified creatures that had emotions and feelings and vengeance and romance and love and art, and all kinds, everything, every different feeling you can have was personified in one of these different bodies out there. And Jupiter was supposedly put in charge of this solar system. Now, he was a sex addict. There's just no other way to put it. Jupiter was. Now, they could change to anything they wanted, Zeus and Jupiter and all of them. And I would imagine Jesus was godlike too, or was a god, or, you know, is a god, and could change his persona into anything he wanted, so he could become, like, they could become anything they want. If you read Ovid, he says they could become anything they wanted. They could become mushrooms or rivers or constellations or animals or ants, fungus, anything they want, anything, because they were gods. And what they did was they came down and transformed themselves into very hot-looking, strong, muscular-looking guys, and just had sex with all the women, and they just trained them how to be sex slaves, basically. It sounded like to me they brought them down all these jewels and fancy this and fancy that, and 200 of the watchers of 600 is what I believe. These are the things I've I read. 200 out of 600 signed a pact with what was, I've heard it's Satan, whoever it was, but it sounds like it was Jupiter, because he was the run. He says, we'll take over, we'll run this place down here, and what's he going to do? And he took 200 guys, he swept a third of the stars from heaven, that's 200 of the 600, came to Earth to party. And the offspring of that party were the giants. Now, here's the crazy thing. Jupiter would have been the guy that was fathering all these giants, basically, zillions of giants. And then he would have also been the one who dispatched Venus to wipe them out. So maybe he didn't know what was going to happen. I don't know. But when the giants took over the whole Earth, they started actually eating all the people on Earth because there was nothing left to eat. He apparently sent Venus. That's what it was written. That's what was written. That is what was written. So let's see what was written, and we'll discuss a lot of the details here, because you got to get into the details. Just a big, quick flash in the pan, that's not going to do it with this. This is serious if it's true. And I have no reason to discount this anymore whatsoever. I show this all the time. I don't know if you've seen it or not. Hold on. If you're new to the channel, and I have a bunch of new people coming on, I was pretty surprised. All right, these are some pictures here. This is right here on Earth. This is in my backyard. That's a hair follicle. You see that little spot right there? That's the pili erector muscle. Right there, it's attached right here. That makes your hair go up and down and stand on end. That right there is this right here. That's the sebaceous gland. That's the hair shaft coming straight up through the top, and this is the root ball. And those two little dots there are the vein and the artery. And this is completely transitioned due to mud fossil preservation in a long soak of some kind of solution that just invaded. It's called nucleophilic substitution. It comes in and invades what was here, stabilizes it with some new chemistry, usually. Sometimes the blood and everything stays perfect. It's incredible the variety of the ways they can preserve. And that's all a process of how much temperature, how long, what kind of mud they were stuck in, where they were they need pH, near salts, and all that stuff I have pretty much figured out. Well, some of it. There's a lot going on. Anyway, and all of this stuff goes way back here. I was working on Sahara being the eye of the eye of the Sahara being Atlantis, and it looked like to me. Now this goes back to 2015, and it's at that same time I found Typhon, because it's right above the eye of the Sahara, and I found that, it seems to me, from some kind of divine intervention, because I had looked at this thing for a couple of years, never saw it. And then all of a sudden, I literally got a message that says, look in Morocco. And I looked, and boom, there was Typhon. This is a very, very strange events have happened to me since I started finding things. Now, I don't know whether it's just coincidental or not, but I sure run into a lot of coincidences. So anyway, let's continue forward here and talk about these different entities and what we can prove and not prove. And what's up on Mars? Well, guess what? That's up on Mars right there. That's an artery with its little blood vessels coming out, and that's the vein which will pull the blood back up to your heart. These are the sarcomeres of the blood of the muscles, and here it is in a better shot. These are the sarcomeres. They pinch together. That's why they have all these breaks and all these little tiny slots. You see those? See all these little slots? And these breaks here, you got to know biology and chemistry, and you got to know everything, and you got to understand weathering. This is up on Mars, no question about it, because there's absolutely no rivulets, nothing showing any kind of erosion from water, and there's just no water up there to speak of. And everything gets dusted off and pretty much sandblasted, so you don't see any watery runoff. And again, this is the sarcomeres, and that's the blood vessel. And this, I've shown this many, many times. There's not a doctor in the world would deny this. None, zero. And this is interstitium, which is in your skin. And this is up on Mars. And Mars was just as big as the stuff on Earth, and the big stuff on Earth is just unfathomably large. And these are the pinched together skin. This is stretched out skin. And that's how they elongate, but they always lock into a ball, so everything will come back together where it's supposed to be. This appears to be a risen up area, and again, sandblasted. This is Mars. I keep getting people saying, "Oh, there's not Mars. It's not Mars. It's all fake." No, this is Mars. Trust me. I followed the Curiosity mission as well as the people at Mission Control did. Trust me. I know everything about this. And that is the Mars Morse code, and that's stretched skin, and that's gathered skin, and that's what the skin should look like normally. And we have this exact same thing on Earth, no difference whatsoever. And all these balls are all over. They're called the Mars blueberries, and on Earth we call them the Moki marbles. There they are, right there. This is basement skin. Above would have been regular skin. In between was mud, and all the mud runs off. At one time, it must have had the exact same amount of water and everything like us. And then on the upper areas where all that mud ran off, you have all of these balls. Same thing on Earth. Moki marbles, identical. All right, like I said, this is going to get a little graphic. All right, but I'm going to show you where Venus was born from, which is the feared god Jupiter. Now, just because he's a male god, that doesn't mean he can't become female. They said they can go from male to female, from big to small, from insects to whatever they want. And they came down as the size of human beings, but we're still the gods. They could transform themselves to anything. So get ready, because you're going to see a very intimate shot of human anatomy, which happens to be female of vagina. Here it comes. Boom. Now, what do we have? This is Jupiter. All right, that's the red spot on Jupiter, with planet Earth coming out of that red spot, which is basically the same size as Venus. What is this called, this red spot? It's called the Venus Mons. A mons is right above the vagina. It's the mound over the top of the vagina. It's called the Venus Mons. What's happening here is this is not a storm. This is an interference pattern. As the planet spins, it has to, this mons, this mound, has to push through these clouds as they come this way. When it does, it goes this way. These things circle around and they just spin off. Simple as that. What's in here is a vagina, and I am going to tell you, I can literally show you almost without a doubt. That's exactly what it is. So get ready, because here it comes. All right, this is the Venus Mons. Well, is the storm. They always call it a storm, not a storm. Now, let me turn this light off so that it becomes a little better sometimes. Now, this is the clitoris. All right, that's obviously the vaginal canal going down here. All right, these are the vaginal ripples that go inside here, just like in human anatomy. The clincher for me was this right here. Right there, you see that? Focus in close on that. Take your time. Look at that very closely. All right, pay very extreme close attention to that. You see that little line there? You see that little line there? This little line here? That's a strap. That is a strap attached to that little round ball at the end, which locks it in. That is a strap that holds body parts together. All right, and that body part is where literally the vagina is secured to the body. I mean, that's as simple as that. These literally is the hairline. This is literally the hairline. You see that? Now, if you could tell me there's any difference in that than a vagina, I'd like to know what. Because I'm going to show you what a real one looks like. And don't forget that little spot I told you and that strap. And the way the little round spot tags it in. Because here's what it looks like. Get ready. Boom. There it is right there. All right, let me bring this in. You see this? Identical. No difference whatsoever. There's the clitoris up at the top, and this is the hairline around the edge. That's that tab. And you see the little strap?
Roger.
All right, so don't forget, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And that right there is the Venus Mons. All right, and that's what it's called, the Venus Mons. And that is plowing through that atmosphere and swirling around it as it comes. And what's happening now is instead of this oval shape, it's turned very round and sloughing off a lot of red stuff. So don't forget, that's not a storm. That is a literal vagina. And that is on Jupiter. Now, I know Jupiter's supposed to be a male god. That doesn't make any difference. When you're a god, you can be anything you want. If you want to give birth to something, you just create a vagina. Out pops a planet. All right, let's see if we can look at a couple other quick things now. I said that Venus came and almost hit Earth and combusted our atmosphere, killed all the giants. Some people survived. No. And I think it might have been in Mohenjo-Daro, in that area where the major impact happened. And when that happened, it literally stopped the Earth from spinning. That's all written in these ancient texts as well. The Earth stood still. And some of them talk about days it stayed in darkness. And then days it stayed in light, and so that sort of thing, as it started to rev back up again. But anyway, all this stuff was recorded, so it just needs to be really ferreted through carefully. Now, this is, again, this is up on Mars. That's that Mars crab. And of course, it is the muscle tissue that it's servicing. And that's where the artery is. And this is all over. Petra is the same as this. Petra was carved out of one of these. You want to see something? You see this here? Let me show you something. This is up on Mars. And again, I know this because of the weathering patterns. This is not something that's in. I get this every time I post this stuff. Oh, that's on Earth. That's on Devon Island. This is that, and da 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 da. No, the things I show you, you can't show me here on Earth. They are not here. Not these things. All right, I talked about the sarcomeres. There they are, right there. All right, what this stuff is, this dark stuff, is the gooey stuff, and it pulls these together, and they end up going like this. All of the white stuff is connective tissue. It doesn't require any bloodiness. The red stuff is just all blood, and it just erodes out, and it erodes out of here because that's blood, blood. They just erode out, and you get these lines between them, and you get a bazillion little connective tissue lines. And that's exactly what we see up on Mars. Where is it? Yeah, here it is right there. There it is right there. These are the sarcomeres, and these are all the connective, and all these just erode out. All that dust comes out. Because up on Mars, there's virtually no moisture to speak of. And so that's why you have no runoff and no rain, little rivulets or any of that stuff. It's just dust. And it's a red planet because it was slaughtered with red blood, literally when it got impacted by Venus. And here's what the impact site looks like. This is Mars. This is all the way across almost the whole side of Mars. It hit right here, and that's extremely deep, and this is wider than the United States, and it was a a magnetic discharge at first and just gouged this thing. Here's what Venus looks like from that event. This is what happened to Venus. Now, I don't know whether it hit here. I would imagine it was here first, and it scraped across Venus this way. Or it could have been hit here, and the final discharge splashed off this way. I don't know. But this is like welding arc stuff. This is not like you just saw up on Mars. Mars was just a gouge right across the whole surface. Now, Venus spins backwards, and that accounts for an extreme amount of magnetic, electrical interaction. So that could very well be, but that's the impact site of those two. Now, we saw Mars, we saw the sarcomeres, and I said this is nothing more than Petra. That right there, if it was big enough, they could have carved Petra in it, and they did. Petra is nothing like, it's just exactly like this. And these sarcomeres right on the side of Petra, big, huge artery here. Huge artery. You want to see it? Here's Petra. You see the sarcomeres? Those are those blocks. You see how this different color from this? And these are in blocks. Those are those sarcomeres. This is an artery. That is literally an artery. All right, and it must have been moist when they did this. And these little, tiny little pocket holes here, I think were put in there so that the moisture would seep out of there. That's my interpretation. But I can see this was all done basically when it was wet. And you see the sarcomeres? Now, can we see this from a distance away? Yes, we can. They did a fabulous job. These guys were really, really craftsmen. All right, this is a huge, huge, huge area of muscle tissue, and some places they attached, the muscle had to attach to tendon, and these are the tendon areas where they attach. Normally there would be balls in these things probably. I don't know whether they removed them or they're not there, or whatever. But this is, the white stuff is where you really get into the tendon. The other stuff we saw here at the bottom, that's real muscle. That doesn't have this kind of connective tissue. This is very dense when you start to get towards the tendon. And this is what's inside the treasury. This is nothing more than inside of a person's body after petrified. And like even up here, you can see that's where blood seeped through here. That was feeding blood into whatever the tissue was here. And this is connective tissue. So we're dealing with just gigantic, gigantic. And now where do you see it from a distance? All right, all I can tell you is that's Petra, and that's sarcomeres, the same stuff. Same stuff all over here. And these where the blood ran to service those muscles. And the whole thing is muscle everywhere. All the way up here, everywhere is no muscle. All the way down here, everywhere. It's, this is just one blood vessel, main artery, but I'm sure it's a main artery because they built the whole building out of one artery, so I would say that would be a main artery. Okay, above your muscle, which I just showed you, all those sarcomeres, you have a floppy layer, which is right underneath your skin, which is interstitium, and it flops and pulls and this and that, and it has all these little balls, tiny, 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 these little balls. Can you see that? I think you should be able to see that. And they're all over underneath your skin. All right, that is what that Mars Morse code was, is this stuff right here. And the balls, some of them had eroded. Now, they have the same thing over here. These are the Moki marbles. Exactly identical to the Mars blueberries. We're talking about the same type of stuff. This is nothing more than flesh and skin, and all these balls are the same as these balls, only this is from a creature that is off the charts, gigantic. Now, all of this was written about, like Enoch wrote about these gigantic creatures, and they took all that stuff out of the ancient text because, in my opinion, they thought, we can't leave it here because everybody will think we're crazy. Nobody's ever going to buy this. And they're right, they were right, but now we have the evidence. I'm going to show you something else. You know, there's another vagina. I'm sorry, that's just, every woman seemed to have one. Now look at this. This is a giant that died in the flood. And this is very interesting because if you know anything about anatomy, you can understand what you're looking at here. That little tiny slit there. See that little tiny crack? All the way up, all the way up. That's called a linea alba. And what that is the separation between the two parts of your body where it seams together. And during the flood, they blowed up a little bit. And when they dried out back out, you end up seeing, actually can see that seam. Nobody could have carved that in there. That's in there because that's part of the human body. Now, this is a baby's face. That's his arm, his shoulder. There's his face breaking through. You see that? Let me come up real close on that. You see that baby's face? This is a coffin birth. So she was pregnant. She was going to give birth to another giant. And that's the flesh being ripped open as the baby's being forced out the side of her womb here. Now, of course, there's the nose and the lips and his eyeball, and that's the shoulder, and his hand is broken off there. All right, you don't see that on the other side. The other side doesn't have a baby coming out. That one does. Now, that is a dead giant's vagina. All right, and I got all kinds of ones that have male body parts that are the, you know, the counterpart for the female. Now, you see the green here? You see all that green? All the green grows wherever there's a lot of blood, and there's still blood in this thing. All right, it loves red blood, and you can see it's pretty well pink anyway. And these, if you look at these are the vaginal ripples, and they're identical to what's up on Mars. I mean, up on in the red spot. You see, they're basically the same thing coming down that red spot. This is undeniable. That's the one that got me. That's it. There's just no way that can be. There's no way that's an accident. And not a single bit of it is out of place. And it's called the Venus Mons. And like I say, we could be in for an issue before too long. Who knows? But all of these things, there's the interstitium, and that's the stretched skin, and that's the gathered skin, and that's the normal skin. And those balls are the Mars blueberries, and they're just eroded out, and all the cheap stuff goes away, and this tough stuff, the balls, stay. Isn't that something? And that is exactly what I showed you, this interstitium. Right there, that's the same stuff. And some of it's stretched and some of it's gathered. So everything is different than what we have always assumed and believed and were told to believe and thought. Now, how does that affect eternity? Well, I don't know. There's a lot to think about, a lot to discuss. And I think I'm going to have to leave that for another day. But this is, to me, this points to the fact that we really, really have to dig into some real in-depth thinking here. And again, I want to go back through. Let me just finish with my text here. It's only a couple of pages, and then we'll be done with this. But this is about God and about belief and about what happened to the solar system, the chaos, and all of these things that were written and talked about. Now it says all these events happen at the same dates and we record all around the world. And Velikovsky did all that research, so I'm sure those things are gone. The statement in Revelation 12 says God's Son was born in space. Now listen to what it says. This is Revelations, and I believe this has already happened, I think. It says, a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun. All right, she was clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth, standing on the moon. Another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon, 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its head. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky. That's 200 of the 600. That would be a third. And flung them to the earth, which was what happened. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that it might devour her child the moment he was born. All right, and that's what was happening. They were eating the kids as soon as they were born. She gave birth to a son, a male child who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. So she did actually have the baby. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. All right, somebody came down and pulled out the baby before the red dragon could eat him. And the woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1260 days. Then war broke out in the heavens. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, the ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Now, then I go into the comets, the body parts. There's body parts in space everywhere. There was battles in the heavens everywhere. A dragon carcass I found in Morocco, too, at this time. This was 2016. A video shows a fake white one, and at that time was admitted as possibly only not. It turned out fake. I showed an enormous dragon carcass, but another video showed a fake. Birth of Venus as a fiery comet during Exodus 3,500 years ago. It was recorded in Egypt and in the Bible, and Earth was wrenched during this time. Venus was a comet and almost destroyed Earth, and then went out and killed Mars, wiped it out. What about the giants in the Earth? Mudfossil soft tissue find in 2012 in Middletown led to a detailed chemical anatomical study, including 3 DNA tests, 7 CAT scans, much lab chemistry, creates the feldspar and associated tissue fossilization. In addition, an autopsy teacher that trains others worldwide agrees these are creatures. There are 3 DNA tests I had done. And, I can't use some of these teachers' names because they don't want to be known, but it was well agreed. And anybody that looks at it, there's no way you can miss it. It's just as simple as that. The DNA was 100% human, and it was dense and excellent quality. CAT scans were very obviously human. Fingers, fingernail bed, another with the nail turned and mineralized. While harvesting DNA, extreme caution was used. And they always said, you must have contaminated it. No, I drilled in deep. I took it out. It was just saturated with blood. And these are giants as stated in the Bible. The matter on Comet 67b, they all came back as biological too. And then they said here, battles raged in the heavens, as it says in Rev 12:7, war broke out in the heavens. They weren't strong enough, and they lost their place. They were hurled down to the earth. The conclusion is the chemistry supports the Jesus story. All right, that's 2016. And as far as the anatomy, the chemistry, the biology, the everything, the ancient texts is all there. And these were giant creatures. As you saw, Petra. And this is just a little piece of a tendon sticking up here. These creatures were, and they're all over the earth. Dragons everywhere. So, I don't know much more I can do about this at the moment, but I'm digging deeper into the relationship between these gods and what they were up to, and all these wars and battles, and it's never changed. And like this, Jordan Maxwell said, they made us in their image with their own likeness, and working basically in the way they work, which is scary as hell, because they're just warmongers and insane creatures, basically. If it's, well, there was just crazy stuff going on. I don't know what else to say. You know, like God says, I have no greater joy than to see my children walk in truth, and truth is what we need. And truth is sometimes pretty scary, and sometimes it's hard to accept, but truth is truth. And when you start reading the stuff that Jesus wrote in these Gnostic texts, well, here's one about the light. I studied the light too. Listen to this. This is just unbelievable, because I now believe that the sun part, the solar sun, is the big God. And listen what Jesus said. They're asking him, they say, if they say to you, where did you come from? Say to them, we came from the light. All right, from the light. Where's the light come from? From the sun. It's the place where the light came into being on its own accord, which is it does it all by itself. And it established itself and became manifest through their image. So the light turns into us in their image. Apparently they have an image that we were made in their image. I don't know. I can't account for, seeing planets and say that's their image. I don't know. If they say to you, is it you? Say to them, we are its children. We are the children of the light. We are made of that light. We are the elect of the living Father. The living Father gave our molecules life. Other molecules don't have life. That book doesn't have life. All right, we have life. We are the elect. We are elected to be life. If they ask you, what is the sign of your Father in you? Say to them, it is movement and repose. Repose means just stationary. Movement means light coming and being manifest and then turning into creatures. All right, it's movement. Zzz, and poof, turns into us. And he also said that whoever understands the world has found only a corpse. And I'm telling you, that's all I can find is dead things that all turned hard. It says, whoever found a corpse is superior to the world, whatever that means. And he also talks about this being the body. If you find, well, here it is, number 80, I think it is. Huh. Jesus said, he who has recognized the world has found the body, but he who has found the body is superior to the world. I'm not going to argue with Jesus. And Jesus said, let him who seeks continue seeking until he finds. When he finds, he will become disturbed and troubled. When he becomes troubled, he will be astonished, and he will rule over the all. Well, all I can tell you is I'm looking. I'm trying to find out as much as I can find out. And the things I have become very disturbed, absolutely 100% troubled. And I am 100% astonished, as I think you should be if you pay attention to this. But anyway, we're going to have to get into this a lot deeper and start to dig through my ancient papers, or my papers that relate to these ancient things. Because I had original thoughts that probably don't hold up now after learning more. If you learn, you should change the way you think, unless you're just perfectly smart from day one. And I don't think there's too many people like that. So you learn and you evolve. And I have to go back and see all the things that I wrote about, because I made, I document basically everything I do. And then I can go back to see what changed. So I'm going to be digging around, and of course I'll be making more videos. All right, I love you all, and I hope you all had a Merry Christmas, and you're going to have a nice New Year. And I'd like to see things get better. Pray for peace. Do what you can. I love you. Bye.